And we are live. My name's JP Berg, and this is episode 37 of The Philosopher, the Stoic, and the Teddy Bear. I'm joined today, as usual, by my co-host, Mr. Peyman Askari. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Peter MacIsaac. I got it written down here. You got a big title. Producer, marketer, research and development, outdoorsman, professional forest fighter, patriot, retired law enforcement, and fellow Cape Bretoner. How are you doing, sir?
Thanks for the invite, gentlemen. Looking forward to it, actually.
It's a pleasure to have you, for sure. So today we're going to actually get to speak about my home province, Nova Scotia. We're generally we're stuck to BC topics, so it's really good to have you to kind of explain some of the dynamics here provincially.
Go ahead, start asking questions, gentlemen, or would you like me to just lead in?
Well,
we've got a real mess down here, gents.
Yeah, I want you to just lead in, man. Explain it to everyone and the case and everything. We'll jump right into it.
Okay, so for anybody who isn't aware, in 2024 we had a snap election in Nova Scotia. we had legislation in place to have a provincial election in July 2025. It was the first order of business by the new Premier, Tim Houston. And if I get a little long on this, guys, I'll try to cut it off to 3 minutes and you guys can chime in, then we'll go back. So what happened is in Nova Scotia, we had a movement called the Independent Nova Scotia Initiative. Our goal was to help communities find candidates to run in every riding in the province. And we only have 1.1 million people down here. So the numbers worked for us here in Nova Scotia. 8 months early, with the rise of the independent movement, Tim Houston called a snap election and broke the first piece of legislation he put in as a premier. And he did it thinking that he had a charter right to do it. And what ended up happening was, in an earlier by-election, we identified here in Nova Scotia the fact that there was a charter violation built into the act. Actually, there's 5 of them in there that discriminate against independent candidates. And the independent candidates in Nova Scotia were unable to get auditors with special training that were put in place by the premier, who's an accountant, and it was put in there to create a roadblock for running as independents. We notified Elections Nova Scotia and the Justice Department of the existing problem, and rather than solve the problem, Premier Houston decided to capitalize on it and cut the movement off 8 months early at the knees, and then went ahead to win a supermajority and has continued since he's been elected to run roughshod over the people down here in Nova Scotia. That's the elevator pitch.
So you want to go ahead, Peyman?
Yeah, I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm just going to ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
You said that Tim Houston violated his first legislative act. If you could tell us what that act was, and then what exactly was the roadblock that he put in accounting-wise?
So when Tim Houston first formed a government, he ran on how important it was to have fixed election dates so that people could plan ahead. People knew what was coming and when it was coming, and there was no advantage to the sitting government. And he was the biggest proponent of set election dates of anybody in Nova Scotia's history. And when he first became premier, when he won, that was his first piece of legislation. He set election dates. And then as soon as it was to his advantage, he called a snap election 8 months earlier. Now, what happened down here at Peyman was that in order to call that election and break a set election date, there had to be an existing emergency. And there was no existing emergency. Therefore, it opened him up to a judicial review. And prior to the election call, when 19 of us realized that we weren't going to be able to get on the ballots because there was a shortage of auditors, and that was the big issue. There was a manufactured shortage of auditors created by a premier who was himself a chartered accountant, knowing full well that the independents would not be able to get the auditors they needed to get their names on a ballot. And we identified that problem prior to the election call. And we went to the government to have that problem solved. And instead of solving the problem, the premier capitalized on it and called a snap election, knowing full well that there were multiple charter violations. But here's the thing. It's like possession's 9/10 of the law. Well, he's a premier now. And we've been in Supreme Court now for 15 months on a judicial review. And in that time frame, he's run the largest deficits in the province's history. He canceled set election dates. He changed the rules for freedom of information access. He tried to change the rules that he could fire an auditor general without notice. I mean, he's running roughshod over things down here, and he's run the largest deficit we've had in the province's history. So our job in our court case is to win, change the laws that the premier has put in, and start unwinding some of this nonsense that's been perpetrated on the Nova Scotia electorate. We had the lowest voter turnout in the province's history. It was down 10% from the previous election. We had a lot of people, excuse me, from one end of the province to the other that were willing to vote for us. People wanted change. They didn't want to have to go back to party politics. You know, you either pick election, you either pick liberal or conservative, and they tried the NDP, and that was a disaster. So it's always a coin toss, and it's always two wings of the same bird. And people in Nova Scotia were looking for a legitimate change. And the independent movement was different from any other movement because we were promoting communities to sign a contract with the independent candidate that laid out do's and don'ts, what they can and can't do, and that contract would be binding. So that if they didn't do what they promised the electorate they were going to do, they could be sued in court for non-performance, void the contract, get themselves fired, and have to pay back to the local people in the ridings the amount of money they invested into getting them elected. And in every riding, it would be a different contract. So what we did was something very new, but it wasn't our idea. I got to give credit where credit due. That idea came from Brian Peckford. He said, Peter, independents are worse than parties if you can't control them because they don't have to answer to anybody. And legally in Canada, once you're voted in, based on the Little Child case in the 90s, no politician can be held responsible for lying to you.
That's the part of this that I find so intriguing, Peter. Now, I've been speaking to people regarding politics provincially and federally for the last 2 years. It's such a great idea, this contractual arrangement. And once you hear it, it makes so much sense. It's like, well, of course, that's what we should do. And that makes you wonder if, like, is that what they're kind of afraid of? Because this has a precedent even in other countries. Like, this is just a better way to do it. It ensures accountability to the electorate.
Yeah, so right now there's zero accountability. That court case in the 1990s gives free rein to any politician, whether you're municipal, whether you're federal or provincial, that irregardless of the promises that you make, you're not obligated by law to fulfill any of them. As a matter of fact, when you write letters to your politicians, they're not obligated to respond, answer you, pick up a phone. They're only answer to you once every election. That was a court ruling. And so that court ruling is, every political party knows that. And here's the problem. No party in Canada will allow any of their representatives to sign such a contract because party politics is not the same as individual politics. For example, in southern Nova Scotia, in our Yarmouth area, they have different problems than we have down in Cape Breton, where you came from, John Paul. And when those people get elected down there, if there's an important issue in your own riding and it doesn't suit, for example, in the main metro areas where they have, where they have more MLAs in power, you're told to sit down, shut up, vote the way you're told to vote by the party whip. And if you don't, you'll get thrown under the bus and you'll find yourself out the door. And they use fixed pensions. Here in Nova Scotia, you can get a pension after 2 years. And you're told on day one, sit down, shut up, do what you're told. And if you play ball with this, you're going to get a pension here within 2 years, a partial pension. If you make it to the full 4 years and do what you're told, you can get a bigger pension. And if you make it in one more round and get 6 years, you get a full pension. So what we're proposing as independents is that one of your contract terms is that you could set parameters in place that a person can only run one term. When you're working in many cases for the largest paycheck you ever got in your life as an MLA, a lot of the MLAs, they go from making not a lot of money to making 120 grand a year. And they're looking at a nice pension, and all they have to do is toe the line. The second they get in politics, they couldn't care less what you think, what you have to say. It just doesn't matter. And they can lie. without any repercussions of any kind. And all you have to do is look around, guys. Do you guys realize that right now, if we had 5 independents in Ottawa that had a contract in place that they had to abide by legally, that we could control Parliament right now? Mark Carney would not be able to do anything that he's doing because those 5 independents would have more power than any of the sitting parties.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and it's like I said, once you hear it, it makes so much sense. The way it's funny you mentioned the pensions. That creates this perverse incentive system where our elected representatives they're incentivized to not rock the boat. That's their thing. Like, we want to get reelected. You want that full pension. It's like, that's such a flaw in the design. I mean, there's so many systemic problems with our system of governance, but I mean, that the way that works is definitely one of the bigger ones as I see it.
So right now, guys, in Nova Scotia, inside our Election Act, we've identified 5 charter violations. As an independent, and I believe this is the case federally, you can't have an electoral district association, an EDA, until the writ is dropped. You can't issue donation receipts until a writ is dropped. Down here in Nova Scotia, you also, let's say, for example, you raised $100,000 to run a campaign and you spend 20. Right after the election, the province sweeps in and takes that $80,000 from you and puts it into general revenue.
Crazy.
So there's 3 charter violations right there, because you're not allowed to discriminate against anybody under Section 3. Section 3 of the charter guarantees you the right to run for office. And if the government puts any form of barrier and knowingly puts a barrier in front of you, it's a Section 3. And there's 3 other sections, a charter violation, and it's straight up. So the biggest issue we're having in Nova Scotia right now is trying to get our hands on something called the record. And normally the record is supposed to be produced within 5 days of when we filed our initial judicial review. Well, it's 15 months. And I can tell you why it's taken 15 months to try to get the record. Because under a case called Bodner in Canada, the record from politicians now, they can't hide secret correspondence between caucus, between them and Elections Nova Scotia, between other members inside their office and inside the government. If they've discussed plans on what they were going to do prior to the election call, then what it proves is something called malicious intent, bad faith, and those 2 parameters open the door to massive penalties against the province for what they've done. See what happens, guys, if you could crush another party legally and not have any repercussions, then the cost of doing it is just the cost of doing business. And Tim Houston is an accountant. He would just look at that as another line item. He'll say, yeah, you know what, we may have to pay these guys some court costs and we may have to pay them minor penalties for what we did, but we shut them down and we're in power now. And it cost us a couple of $1 million, but that's just a line item for an accountant. And now he controls a $17.5 billion budget. And our second biggest trade partner in Nova Scotia right now is China. And when they introduced fishing tariffs down here last year, Tim didn't say hardly a word about it. And you know how big lobster fishing is down here, John Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, so China tacked on a 25% tariff, and Tim Houston didn't say a word about it. So part of my background, I was an investigator. I did law enforcement work for the bulk of my career over at Natural Resources. And what happens is you always have to look at a preponderance of the evidence, and even if it's circumstantial. And so I look at a series of things that happened in the province, and I'm looking at what happened in PEI. The Communist Chinese Party has fully infiltrated PEI, and there's been a couple of really good books on it. If you guys get a chance to interview Gary Clement, he's former head of the RCMP for Proceeds of Crime. He'd be a great guest. I'll send you guys the data later. But Gary's talked about CCP infiltration. And I'm looking down here in Nova Scotia right now, guys, the top 3 positions in the next election in Nova Scotia are held by first-generation Chinese. And Tim Houston gets a super majority, something unheard of, with the lowest voter turnout in our history. Now, I'm not saying we had CCP interference, but I can't say that we didn't. And as part of our request for the record, we want every piece of correspondence from everybody on anything to do with what happened, both in the early by-election and the actual election. And I can tell you one thing, the government does not want to give it to us, but they're going to be forced here very shortly. And when they do, This will probably blow up and be one of the most devastating precedent-setting legal cases in Canadian political history.
Peyman?
Peter, I've been following your case for a while. I think you and I talked right when this happened back in 2024, I guess. What kind of resistance? Well, the question that comes to mind is like, what kind of resistance are you getting from the executive? It seems like they're trying to stall you, but like the judiciary, do you still have faith in the judiciary? The reason I ask is the Mosley decision, it went in our favor, but there's no, like, it's almost like it doesn't matter. Like, do you see a resolution coming out of this?
Yeah, we see a major resolution, and we see precedent-setting changes to electoral legislation. And I'll tell you the reason why. Out of the 19 independents that were kept off the ballot, there's 8 applicants in the case. So it's what we call a living. It's a living legal case right now, and because of the damages that have been imposed on the applicants, what ends up happening is they have to award remedies. And the remedies, we have a long list of remedies that we're asking for. And it'll be legislative changes that will affect the legislative changes that will have to be made in Nova Scotia because they're charter violations. Those will automatically create case law for every province across Canada. Out in BC right now, guys, where you are, if you had 5 independents, you wouldn't be in the mess you're in. Because the 5 independents would be able to say to the government, you're not giving 2/3 of Vancouver to the Musquash tribe. Right? I mean, it's a mess. And so right now down here in Nova Scotia, we have the same issue. The natives down here are saying that they can grow cannabis on land wherever they want because they're saying they didn't cede the land. Well, in Nova Scotia, in the 1760-61 treaty that's in place, it's in black and white that they ceded all land rights, fishing, hunting rights, and rights to I'm trying to think the word, it's not compensation, but rights to consult here in Nova Scotia. And very few people are aware of that. As a matter of fact, I just sent 2 reports today through to an independent MLA here in Nova Scotia to hand to Scott Armstrong, who's in charge of, our Minister of Justice. And it's going to tie his hands. He's going to have to do something, because I got a friend of mine right now selling a $1.75 million property, and they're heading down to Florida because they live on the waterfront in Nova Scotia, and they're concerned if natives lay land claim to it, their property value is going to tank, much like it did out in BC. So I'll give you an example right now, guys. If we had, our goal was to try to get at least 12 independents out of the 55 seats in Nova Scotia. 12 independents would have given a say to the province that they would not be able to do the bulk of the things they're doing right now. The goal was never to take over the government. The goal with independents is have them tied down with a contract so that when the government is close, they hold the balance of power. Because if you can't get the votes from them, they can tank the government. And by contract, they can't be bribed to cross the floor. They can be sued for that. In your terms, you can say if you cross the floor, you have to step away from politics for this entire election period. Right? So floor crossing becomes a thing of the past. You have to ask yourself, guys, what does the evidence suggest that the 3 people who crossed the floor to the federal Liberal Party were bribed? I'm just an average guy asking average questions. If you were a reasonable person and you looked at that, you'd have to say, why would those people completely destroy their reputations to do that? And Mark Carney's a banker. To him, whatever they offered behind the scenes, that's just another line item. So people don't understand the power of independents that are tied down with contracts. And because parties operate with party whips, it's impossible for them to agree to allow their party members to sign those contracts inside their riding. Because at that point, the voter controls them and the party no longer controls them. And because I was in federal politics behind the scene, guys, I'll tell you 100% that the person you see up front does not make any decisions. There's a room full of people behind the scenes that say, here's what you're doing next.
I'm a firm believer in that for sure. It just seems like these people are figureheads, like they're just regurgitating rhetoric or scripts. It's never seemed so synthetic to me. Like I said, and I think a lot of Canadians are really starting to notice this, and it's making them feel really demoralized. Because mentioning the floor crossers, it's like you got to admit both major parties are pretty similar in order to facilitate something like this. Like if they were actually in opposition to one another, crossing the floor would be unheard of. That would be preposterous.
Well, the other big thing too, guys, is if you have a lead of 40 or 50 seats and someone crosses the floor, who cares? I mean, the people are going to get ripped off in the area who voted for them, right? When you vote for somebody, that's who should have to represent you. But because they're not tied down with a contract, they can do and say whatever they want. The issue is right now, if the Carney team can bribe a couple of more floor crossers, they can actually do something that's never been done before in Canadian politics. They can form a government by bribing people to cross the floor. And you're looking at over $1 trillion in pension funds that Carney needs to get his fingers deep, he needs to get his arm down in that short pocket as far as he can get it. And he needs no roadblocks. And to get no roadblocks, he has to have a majority. And the only way to get the majority is you have to bribe somebody to cross the floor. And if people think they're not bribed to cross the floor, they're delusional.
Peyman?
Peter, ever since the April election that I ran in, my view has substantially changed. My faith in Canadians has kind of disappeared. You look at Canadians, the extent to which they want to invest in their country is 1 hour every 4 years to vote. And they're not willing to pay attention to the news. And the other thing is, it's very easy to lie to the voters because the voters don't want to know what's wrong. They don't want to know how to fix it. They want to know how you're going to spend money. That's really what it comes down to. And with this horrible land title transfer in BC, I'm just waiting. Like I'm waiting to see when they'll come out with pitchforks, and I just don't see it happening. And I have to ask myself, if we have another floor crossing and Mark Carney bribes his way into a majority government, are Canadians going to be like, are they going to wake up, or there's going to be, we want our backyard barbecues?
So you have to remember, Peyman, here in Nova Scotia, all across Canada, we're victims of probably one of the best financed and well-coordinated psyops in the country's history. And one of the smartest moves that was ever made in Canada came, John Paul, from a guy down in the Glace Bay area. And he was... Look, the guy's name is going to slip me again. He was just in there and it just popped out. He was on Trudeau's team. What was that guy's name? It'll come to me. But he was the guy who convinced them to invest $700 million into CBC and finance them and said, if we win this election when Trudeau first got in 2015, we'll give you an extra $700 million. And it worked. And they said, okay, that's just a line item. Now we control mainstream media. And the same thing happened when COVID came. If you became part of the Trusted News Initiative, you got financed as long as you toed the party line. And the party line right now has a lot of people completely, they're completely brainwashed. And the other thing that's happened is, and this was another brilliant move by the Liberals. Actually, I have to give credit where credit's due, was they began importing voter blocks into swing ridings that they could never predict what way they were going to go. So if you bring in enough immigrants and you get to decide where they're going to go, you decide that they're going to go in swing ridings, and then you're going to pad their pockets so that they become Liberal voters for life. And what was once swing ridings, 12 years ago, they're gone full on Liberal, and they're never coming back, because ultimately people will vote for the people who give them the most handouts.
So was Gerald Butts? Was that the name?
That's the name. Gerald.
Yeah, I thought it was. I had to look it up to verify.
Yeah.
Now there was also a law. You would probably know more about this than me, but wasn't there a law passed within the last, say, 5 years where it's now not illegal for the media to knowingly lie to Canadians?
Yeah, actually, I think it was 2019. Trudeau passed that. But you got to remember, guys, it was around 2020 when Mark Carney became an unpaid advisor to Trudeau, and he didn't take any money so that there could be no declaration of conflict of interest. So every single thing that's happened in Canada since 2020, you had Gerald Butts pulling strings behind the scenes. He's an old college buddy of Trudeau's. He still works with Carney's wife, with the company out of the U.S. that designs policy for Canada. And at the same time, Mark Carney was the guy who structured every single thing that you see happening now, so that Brookfield Asset Management can get their long arm into even at our pension money. I mean, they've accessed, I believe, at least $100 billion in pension funds already. Almost every single business deal that Carney's pulling off benefits Brookfield Asset Management. One of the best guys out there who's been able to break it down the best is a guy named Robin Hillier. Robin's out of I think Calgary. And he's probably done the best research I've seen anybody do in regards to how crooked what Carney is doing. Everything he's doing is violation section 121 of the criminal code. You can't be involved in any way, shape, or form in any type of an investment that puts money back into your pocket. So I've already contacted the RCMP to start an investigation, and they just got back to me and said, we know what's happening, but we can't get warrants to monitor the Prime Minister unless a whistleblower comes forward and tells us that they personally have overheard conversations that he's not supposed to be having. You ever wonder why he flies everywhere and doesn't talk to anybody on Zoom or anything digital? Because everything he says digitally goes on the record. He asked, anytime you're doing backroom deals, they have to be done in person where nobody can overhear you. And the RCMP cannot get the grounds they need to be able to get the warrants to bust him. And the guy's a wizard at what he does. Mark Carney is so greasy. If he showed up at your office tomorrow, he could slide in under the door without opening it. He's an expert at this stuff. And you know what? I mean, he looks across and this guy's a banker. He knows what he's doing. Well, and he does. But I come from a different area than an era from you guys. I turned 68 next month. I grew up thinking bankers were scum of the earth. Absolute scum of the earth. I was around when interest rates went up to 18, 19%, guys, and watched people just lose everything they had. Bankers are your enemy. A banker is not your friend. And here now in Canada, we've got a banker who is making decisions to line his own pockets, and every single thing he touches somehow puts money back in his own pocket. And the RCMP have their hands tied. CSIS knows what he's up to, but CSIS can't do anything because they gathered the data on him illegally. CSIS doesn't use warrants. They're a spy agency. They're spies. And the data they have, when they give it to the RCMP, they can't take any action on it because it was collected illegally. And people have no concept of how that system works. It's the same thing here in Nova Scotia, guys. So what's happened is once we started our law case, one of the first things that Tim Houston did, once he got in power, other than cancel set election dates, he changed the rules so that the government would determine what you could get in a Freedom of Information request. So a Freedom of Information request costs $5, and you got people inside of government that are upset at how things are going, and they'll give you data you don't even ask for sometimes. Tim Houston said, no, we're going to decide what we give you from now on. You're not going to be able to have oversight on us. And here's something I'm going to throw crazy in. I'll open this up to another question, but then I want to explain something that Sean Fraser did and why the federal government is now tied into this mess.
I'm happy for you to just go ahead. I'm curious to hear.
So what ended up happening, guys, the first judge we had was a guy named Supreme Court Justice was Patrick Murray. And he's from down in Sydney, John Paul, down your neck of the woods. And so real level-headed guy. He was a senior Supreme Court judge. And in the middle of our case last August, he up and took an early retirement. Said, I'm out of here. See you, boys. And he put a second judge. He got to pick the next judge. And that judge came in, and he was a good level-headed guy, too. Now, over at Elections Nova Scotia, they hired the largest law firm in Eastern Canada, which is Stuart McKelvey, to represent them in this case. And one of the partners at Stuart McKelvey was a guy named Scott Campbell. And Scott Campbell was the lead defense for Elections Nova Scotia. And in October, Sean Fraser, as the new Attorney General, reached in to Stuart McKelvey, pulled Scott Campbell out, and appointed him to replace Patrick Murray as a Supreme Court judge in the middle of our ongoing case. And Tim Houston and Sean Fraser are on record publicly saying multiple times, we're close friends and neighbors. And the Premier can get a say into who gets appointed as a Supreme Court judge. There's a separate committee, but there's nothing to stop the Premier from calling his buddy and say, look, it'd be nice if Scott Campbell goes over in that case. So maybe we can throw a little weight our way and get rid of these pesky independents. And to date, he hasn't recused himself from our case. We've had no official notification that he's been recused. He was supposed to recuse himself within weeks of being appointed. And that was back in October. So now we're already on our fourth Supreme Court justice, and we're waiting for a final determination on what we're going to receive in the form of the record. And if we get everything that we're asking for, the court may find itself in a position they have to declare the election call illegal if it's a charter violation. And then the problem is what are the remedies going to be? Because no court in Canada to date has overturned a full election. They say, well, it's past the date. As a matter of fact, when Tim Houston went in and got reelected, his first order of business was to cancel said elections, which was his first order of business to put in place. And he did that to create a diversion inside the courts called mootness, where they said, well, no, you can't argue about the election call because it's now moot, which means it's too late. And so what that's called bad faith and malicious intent to what they call frustrate the judiciary. And then Tim Houston went up to Ontario and met with Doug Ford, and they had a meeting between him and three other premiers where they said, we're not happy with the Supreme Court being able to override any of our charter violations. We're voted in premiers. We should be able to do what we want. And the last thing we want is the Supreme Court telling us what we can and can't do. And he did that in the middle of a Supreme Court case, who's actually looking at him going, you've got 4 or 5 charter violations here, Tim. Plus, Tim has another charter violation against him, and he closed the woods down here in Nova Scotia last year. I just submitted for the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, a 284-page affidavit on that case, because I'm a professional forest firefighter, and I did it for 29 years for our provincial government. And everything that Tim did, in my opinion, was 100% illegal, and he knew it. But because he has a supermajority, charter means nothing to Tim Houston. He just goes, do it, kick the can down the road for a couple of years. It's too late. I can get away with what I want. And by the time they get around it, we'll declare it moot in the courts because we're not doing it now. And that's how it works, guys. And if we had the independence in place that we had planned to have, they would just shut everything down because they can't change their mind and be bribed by another party and say, look, come on over to our party. We'll make you a minister. We'll do these things, but we need your support on these things. Can't do it with independence with contracts. And those contracts, guys, are the same, John Paul, as if I hired you to come work for a company I own. Here's your performance. Here's what I expect. Here's what you're going to do. If you don't do it, we're going to have a review on you. And if you fail the review, you're fired.
It's reasonable. It's what would occur in the regular market.
Exactly.
It's truly, and I try to explain this to other people in regards to Nova Scotia. It's like an old boys club here. It's totally still who you know,
100%.
not what you know. And like you see that nepotism is so well entrenched. You've seen that with the gun buyback. There was a relation to the minister and the police chief in Sydney when they were doing their gun buyback program with Gary Adensandre. Like it's shocking the level. And I don't know why. I guess it's relative to the size of Nova Scotia, but they're seemingly more likely to get away with it here. It's nice to see you guys holding them to account, but like the cynic in me wants to say they're gonna pardon the vulgarity, they're gonna find a way to weasel their way out of this. So
one of the issues that's been brought up is our premier's a Mason. Now this one's going to get me in trouble. This is the stuff I wrote about in my book that one day will get my book banned in Canada. Is that we have roughly 5,500 Masons in Nova Scotia, and the premier is a high-level Mason. because I've seen him give the secret Akadak, Fred Flintstone, Barney Flintstone, Buffalo Lodge secret handshakes, right? Plus, I've seen fundraisers for him at Masonic Halls. And so Tim came out of nowhere with a 10-year history, looking after people's money down in the Bahamas for the Paradise Papers. And all of a sudden, he's the premier controlling these budgets. And then you ask, well, how did that happen? Well, all across the civil service in Nova Scotia, there's senior executives at all levels in all branches of government in Nova Scotia that are high-level Masons. And I'll give you an example. The person who's in charge of our forest fire control effort here in Nova Scotia, the senior director, he's a Mason, totally incompetent, should have been fired for incompetency, but a brother Mason won't fire him. That's just the way it is. And so when you try to figure the old boys club, it's not just that it's an old boys club, it's an old secret handshake boys club here in Nova Scotia.
That's phenomenal to me. I'm sorry, Peyman. I'm hogging the questions. It's impressive to me. So they don't have to disclose this to the public when they're running, that they're in a secret organization.
Well, that was one of the things that if we had enough independence, we had a whole list of things that we were looking for communities. And as the Independent Nova Scotian Initiative, we have no say. We're just a society. We don't run parties. We don't do any of that. We just teach people how to find good candidates and how to make the system work. And one of the things we were recommending was that if you've sworn an oath to anybody that supersedes your oath of office, you shouldn't be in office. You have to disclose it. If you've taken an oath that that you have a loyalty to the Masons that exceeds your loyalty to your voters, why would anybody with a firing brain cell vote for you? This is not complicated stuff, guys.
Go ahead, Peyman.
I guess I'm from over here in BC. To me, the reason that BC is a dump is there's so many ideological people in the BC NDP party that just don't believe in property rights. But what is this? What is the single thing or the most important thing in Nova Scotia? Is it the fact that they're Masons? And if they are they interested in power, money? Is it CCP influence? Is it the WEF? Do they hate life?
It's a combination of all of the above. Because all you have to do is look at the evidence. And when you bring up the NDP, for example, here in Halifax, probably 65% of our city council are NDPs that fight with the Liberal mayor every day. We can't get anything done. You can tear the front end out of your vehicle on almost any street in Halifax in potholes, but the NDP wants to spend $95 million on bike lanes. And right now, in my front lawn, the pile of snow is 6 feet deep, man. 2 meters of snow on my front lawn, and they want to spend $95 million, the NDP, on bike lanes. So what happens is common sense has left the building, and most people, Peyman and John Paul, they don't want to be involved in politics anymore. And the reason being, and it's, there's a number of reasons, but I look at the bulk of politicians that are right now involved, and they're there for a pension and a high-paying job. And everything we were doing with our movement in Nova Scotia is designed to throw that out the window. As a matter of fact, virtually everybody that I know had to be talked into being a candidate. They didn't want to be. People in the community said, look, you're well-spoken. We'd like you to do it. And they're going, no, I don't want to do it. The reality of it is, guys, I got talked into running. I'm an applicant in that case. And the reason being, I didn't want to do it. And I grew up in Inverness County, and I had a bunch of people from one end of the province and the other said, Pete, I know you don't live here, but if you'll run for us down here, we'll get you elected because you can speak up for us down here. And I said, no. And then I got cornered where the guy said, well, what if we need 6 or 7 seats to control the government and we get 6 and you didn't run? How you going to live with yourself? And they had me, and I'm like, oh. So it was put up or shut up time. So I went through the whole process. And then I couldn't get my name on a ballot because we called on 142 auditors and none of them would represent us. And the government knew that was going to happen. That was coordinated. And like I said, the premier could have fixed the issue. And here's another thing too, guys. Even in the report done by Elections Nova Scotia after the election, they said in that report that they were advised by the province that it looked like they were going to have an early election. And all the premier had to do was go in while government was sitting, the legislature was sitting. He could have lifted those charter challenges out of the Elections Act, And he could have said, well, we're getting rid of set election dates. And then he could have called it earlier, and that would have made it legal. And we wouldn't have had that extra 8 months to organize, and we would have lost anyway. But because he's a Mason, and because he's got an addiction to power, he couldn't help himself. That's one thing about Tim Houston. He's highly predictable. He has an addiction to power, and he just will not tolerate anybody standing up to him. And so that's a good thing for us, because the amount of mistakes he's made and traps he's walked into, these guys are cornered. Now, I'm not saying we're going to win, but we have at least a 51% chance of winning. I believe we have them boxed in with no escape. But that's just me, and I'm an applicant with my fingers crossed. The fact of the matter is mainstream media in Nova Scotia will not touch this case. Nobody will talk about it. We've made applications to local radio, all Nova Scotia, which is, any subscription things. They will not talk about this, period. So everything that we try to get out is through, if somebody asks me to go on a talk show, I will cancel my coyote hunting, fishing, anything to go and try to educate people on what's happening, because either we get this fixed or we're going to lose the province, right? We're $1.4 billion in deficit for, a little province of 1.1 million people. And the premier who did that is an accountant. They had a projected budget deficit of 500 million and they went 900 million over. How do you go 900 million over in a province with only 1.1 million people?
It's like the way it's changed now. Like, there was a time many years ago that if you were going, you felt obligated. If you were a successful individual and you were retiring, or it was slowing down for you, it was like a noble pursuit to kind of offer your services, to be a civil servant, to represent your people. And now that's non-existent. It's the self-serving people with this malleable character. They'll be whatever you want them to be to get their seat. And that's kind of what replaced it. And then it's not like we're helping it. The electorate in Nova Scotia and the electorate in Canada is apathetic. There's little or no political engagement from the vast majority of people. They have no idea what's going on. They just know it's getting worse. But considering it's getting worse, they're still not willing to look at the issues. It's frustrating.
So both you gentlemen probably know who Yuri Bezmenov is. Yuri Bezmenov was a Russian defector. And he gave an interview back in the early 90s. And he said, in politics, in order to overthrow governments, what you have to do through a series of steps is you have to get people that you beat them down so much, right, that they throw their hands in the air and say, what's the point? That's why we had record-breaking low turnout in our last provincial election, because people have thrown their hands in the air and say, why bother showing up? No matter what happens, because they're not accountable and they haven't signed contracts, they're going to do what they want when they get in there. They have a history of lying. So what they'll do is humans are relatively easy to control through lies. You just tell people what they want to hear, and then you repeat it to them over and over and over again. And it's just basically a psyop operation, and it's a tactic that works. And you just tell them what they want to hear over and over again. And then when you get in, you do whatever you want. Because if you don't win, you can't rule. And therein lies the problem. And the left knows that they have no moral boundary that they won't cross. And the people on the right won't cross the moral boundaries they need to beat the left at their own game. And so you find yourself in a catch-22. So you're going, well, if I'm going to beat these guys, I got to be a scum-sucking snake just like them. And people who get in politics for the right reason don't want to do it. And parties just come to you and say, well, do you want that pension or not? So you're going to have to do things that you don't want to do. And that's the beauty of what we're trying to do with independence. You've got a contract. You're never going to be allowed to do as a politician what you want to do. It's not about what you want to do. It's about what the people who voted you in tell you you're going to do. We voted you in. You represent us. You do not represent yourself. I look down here at the floor crosser we had from Nova Scotia. And for him to do what he did, I mean, he's going to be looked at something you'd scrape off the bottom of your boot down in his riding for the rest of his life. It doesn't just affect him, it's his family. his wife is going to be a social pariah. His kids will be social pariahs. And he sold his soul to cross the floor. And that was Kris D'Entremont. And Kris, and I know Kris. And, and everybody that knows him now think he's absolute pond scum. And this other guy from out west who did the same thing, right? I mean, what did he get offered? I mean, I saw him standing over there with, was it Xi Jinping? He took him over when he went to China. I mean, the guy crossed the floor. It's just an absolute disgrace. So you look at these people, and let me put it to you this way. So I'll ask you this. If you could get, let's say, 5 people to cross the floor, then you had a majority government, and you could make billions off it, maybe hundreds of millions in your own pocket. Would you be willing to give them 10 million each in a side deal to get them to cross the floor? Because that's just coffee money at that level. When you're looking at hundreds of billions, 50 million, guys, is coffee money. And you need to understand when you watch these things happen, because I've been involved in politics, the story behind the scene would sicken you. No matter how bad you think it is, it's worse in the party system. The party system is completely and totally broken. That's why you can't get anything to happen, is because once you're in there, you're controlled, and you're not controlled by the leader. There's a team behind the leader in the back room that you never know who they are. You'll know when you're in politics. And the federal Conservative Party has been completely overrun by red Tories. The Liberal Party, more like communists. And when Yuri Bezmenov had said, all you have to do is get people to become so discouraged that they don't care anymore. And that's where we're at right now.
He called that the stage of demoralization.
Demoralization, that's exactly what it was.
I think that's fairly accurate. Before we continue, we've been going for about 50 minutes. I would like to appeal to everyone. I'm neglecting my duties as host. I would like to appeal to everyone. If you guys could please share this stream. It's immensely advantageous. It's pretty much the only reach we get is organic now. So if you could share it or send it to anyone you think might enjoy content such as this, we're being just devastatingly deboosted in the algorithm. It's shocking. Like I was mentioning to Peter before we went live, like when we first launched this endeavor, we were getting our record was over 3,000 live viewers. We were getting 10 to 12,000 views per episode. It's just night and day. Now we're getting 400 live viewers. It's just shocking how much they put the boot on us.
Guys, I'm surprised you're even getting that with me on. I'm not kidding. The amount of suppression that I'm getting and that we're getting in regards to what we're doing. You have to remember, we are threatening right now the entire regime. Everything is being threatened by what we're doing. Just imagine the power of those 5 independents in Ottawa. They would control trillions of dollars. All they'd have to do is say, no, you're not doing any of those things. So what an independent can do is they can table legislation, right? And if the parties in power don't go along with it, you control on a vote. When it comes to a vote, you're the deciding factor when it comes to overthrowing a government, and just go, no, you've got a non-confidence vote. If you need those 5 votes and you can't get them, you can take a government down. The power of this is somebody somewhere up there, the Gerald Butts of the world, know that there is no way on God's green earth can we allow MacIsaac or any of those guys that turn this stuff into a precedent in Canada. Because when we do, we're going to lose control of party politics. And it'll apply provincially, and it's going to apply federally, because charter violations are charter violations. Once the precedent is set, guys, the whole game changes. So I don't mind sticking my neck out, because it's a long way out there. Someone's got to do it, right? I'm a grandfather. I got grandkids going grampy, right? What are you going to do? Just watch Netflix? Complain? Right? Are you going to actually stick your neck out? I'm surprised, guys, they haven't pulled my book. Some of the stuff that I got in there, and that's an update on my book right now on the Redneck Conservative, because I did a revision on it to include what's happening in Canada since Carney's been elected. The book originally came out in, I think it was early 2025, maybe late 2024. And then I've got another new book coming out now too, I was talking about earlier, and that's going to be Don't Die in Wildfires. And I just got the Canadian government for the mess they've made of our forest fire situation. Think about this, guys. 10 years ago, it was called forest fires. Now, all of a sudden, it's scary wildfires. It's not a wildfire. If it's on a lawn and it burns an acre, it's a small forest fire. But everything is a wildfire, and that's part of the climate change narrative. I will give Pierre, what's his name there, heading up the Conservative Party.
Polyev.
Yeah, Pierre Polyev, kudos, because the other day he just called it the scam that it is. He said it's designed to take money out of your pockets. Anybody believing that stuff right now, guys, has lost their mind. Are you guys aware that Canada has the third largest forest in the world? And each of those trees absorbs on average 48 pounds of CO2 annually. That's over 15 trillion pounds of CO2 annually, and Canada gets sucked up by our forests. All of humanity in Canada, every industry, all combined, we only produce around about 1.14 trillion pounds of CO2. We need less than 11% of our forest to suck up every bit of CO2 in Canada. Every tax dollar that we spend on this, you're being robbed. It's absolute nonsense. It's garbage. Oh, well, we need to do this. And, I'm looking at how many EVs coming in from China. I wonder how well they're working up in Edmonton today. Your electric cars. Here the other day, it was, I don't know, minus 25. It's crazy, guys.
It's all seemingly part of the narrative for the deindustrialization. That's what it is. They want to deindustrialize Canada, and that was the prerequisite for it. It's this climate change, but it's been thoroughly debunked by a plethora of well-credentialed academics. I'm just going to name a few if anyone in the audience wants to look this up, because I know that you've been absolutely inundated with this climate change narrative. It's nonsense. Judith Curry, William Happer, Richard Lindzen, Patrick Moore, Bjorn Longberg, Stephen Koonin, Willie Soon, Gregory Wrightstone, Greg Braden, and Alex Epstein. And there's numerous more. This is just a short list I compiled. And these individuals, very well-credentialed academics, some of them scientists, they've debunked this in different ways. Like it's just, I can't believe, considering the amount of people that have debunked this, that they're still able to use this as kind of the rationale to do what they're doing in our economy, in our countries. Like it's nuts.
We got a big battle ahead of us, gentlemen. Right? So how do we win at this? There's the question. Rather than, I spend a lot of my time identifying what the problems are, but what we're doing in Supreme Court is using their own rules against them. And the province underestimated 8 yokels down here who were going to run. And what we decided to do on the board of INSEE, we have 2 engineers, and we looked for a solution, not from a political angle. We looked for a solution from an engineering standpoint. And engineers, both of these engineers specialize in dismantling things and putting them back together. And then when Brian Peckford knew what we were doing, he said, look, I really support what you're doing because I realized the party system's broken. And he said, here's what you need to do. And it was his idea for the contract. And you got to remember, guys, right now, we've got countries all over the world watching what's happening. New Zealand, Australia, the UK, any parliamentary system doesn't have to be parliamentary. It can be the same as what the US has. Any country where you have votes, I can't see any reason for the rest of your life voting for anybody not willing to sign a contract that says, I'm going to do what you ask me to do. Why in God's name would you ever vote for a politician not willing to say, yes, I promise I'll do this, and if I don't do it, I'm not going to be held accountable? Because under Canadian law, you can't be held accountable.
Go ahead, Peyman.
You mentioned how so we have almost 300 viewers right now, and you said you're surprised because you're suppressed. When we started, we had thousands of viewers. I think we got up to close to 5,000. So they're suppressing us. So my question is, I'm treating this like an interview, but how is Bill C9, like these censorship bills? Like, do you think that the province and the federal government, they're working together? They're like, we got to get this Peter MacIsaac guy under control. Let's hit him with hate speech.
Yeah, well, here's what happens is you have to be really careful about what hate speech is. And once that passes, I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to retroactively come back after you, right? The thing is I count on them underestimating me because they've done it so far, right? Now, I'll give you an example, guys. Tim Houston, I've been out fishing with him. Tim Houston knows things about me that he has a tendency to leave me alone. But other government officials don't. You got to remember, I was trained law enforcement. I'm a wildlife specialist. I've got a whole skill set that people tend to just, yeah, we should probably leave him alone. But I'll give you an example, guys. In the last 2 weeks, my number of posts on X and on Facebook, my ability to post memes has been cut by at least in half just in the last 2 weeks. I've been going on X and going, whoa, what's this? I can't post a meme? Because what's happening, the Liberal Party has figured out they will hire people to just file complaints against you on an ongoing basis. If you're causing enough problems for them, they have unlimited resources. They can take your tax money, hire people to file complaints against you. Same thing with you, Peyman. Same thing with you, John Paul. If once you start to gain traction, they'll try to stamp you out, right? So initially, that was my whole idea behind when I first wrote a book. I forget, I had around 5,000-6,000 followers on X, and I just was gone one day, and I went, what the hell happened there? So when I wrote that book, the idea on the book is the final chapter of my book lays out the whole independent movement plan, so that once you have a copy of something physical, it can't be crushed, right? And then there's other platforms that you can try to get on, and hopefully that you can get. The ideal actually is to take something like this and then try to find somebody with 80, 90, 150,000 followers to post it. And if you can do that and it slips through without being caught, all of a sudden you might get, 200,000 views. When I did that video on what was going on with forest fires in Nova Scotia and what a massive screw up that the premier had created down here, I got 177 million views on that video. Right.
It seems like they're being extra careful. Just to put it in perspective, right now I have 30,000 followers on X. We're streaming to my account. Kris Erikson, he's not here today, but we're streaming to his account. He has 110,000 followers. Really? And Peyman has 7,000 followers. So I mean, and it's like I said, we used to get 3,000 live viewers, people watching live as we were doing this. Now we're getting 300. It's not subtle. It's almost like they want to demoralize you on the similar concept. They want you to say, well, hey, man, we're just wasting our time here. And they don't realize how stubborn I am. I'm going to continue if there's two people watching.
And what you're saying, John Paul, is actually part of a psyop that works. Mm-hmm. It's well documented. The Tavistock Institute specialized in this. How can you control millions of people? And every single tactic that they turned into a science is used against all of us right now, 100%. For a little while there, when I restarted up my new X account, I was getting 1,000 new people every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now I don't get 3 in a week. I might lose 10. I mean, yes. I'm serious. They will not let me. I think I'm up to 8,700 or something like that now. But I'll do a really big show. I was doing shows when I was doing them with Freedom Train International. We were getting 77,000 live stream views. And then after that, we'd get into the millions. And I might get 2 new viewers. Like, I'm just crushed. But what'll happen is when we win the case, you have to create news that they can't hide from. Right now, even our case guys, I can't get Ezra Levant to cover what's going on in our case. Why?
I don't know Ezra Levant, but I don't trust that outlet. I think they have their own agenda that they're endeavoring to promote. But that's, again, I have nothing. That's total conjecture on my behalf. I don't want a defamation lawsuit, Ezra.
Well, yeah, all I can tell you is I've sent our story to them a number of times, and they just won't cover it. So if you were looking at potentially one of the a court case in the Supreme Court that we managed to get in front of, that could potentially change politics in Canada, you would think it would be a big enough story. So, I looked at True North, some of the big feeds that are getting 400,000 or 500,000 views won't cover the story. Why?
Well, I'll give you my quick theory. I think it's because they know it will have them deboost it. This is what I'm saying. So many of these so-called influencers that are independent, they're audience captured. And there's money in this, man. When you got 100,000 followers, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. They know if they endeavor to now start telling the truth, hard truths, that their followers aren't going to like, they could be suppressed for it. So, I mean, it's showing who has some integrity right now. Everyone who does is being deboosted.
So, you know, I'm following Moose on the loose. How they've let him get out as much as he has in this last little while is beyond me. But, you know, and I'm looking at another new show that come up. It's called Bake Some Things, Tap the Maple. But he's doing incredible research, and he's putting out shows twice a day. And he can't get traction. It's the liberals with Gerald Butts, because Gerald Butts is a wizard at this too. He's as good as Mark Carney, if not better, pulling strings behind the scenes. And those guys know how to hire people that do nothing but file complaints against your show. And when that happens, you're going to get, they still have to deal with them. You know, I'll get these things that go, where'd that come from? The problem is when you file an appeal, it takes you days. And I don't know who's looking at them. I know one thing, that there's no way Elon Musk got all the rats out of Twitter, out of X. They're still there. There's so much money at stake and so much power at stake, guys. Our story, they will do everything humanly possible to keep it suppressed.
Well, they're suppressing a lot of voices. It's this whole apparatus. When I got on here a couple of years ago, I was just like you. I had growth, and I was growing. I'm climbing this mountain, and then in March, when the election was called last March, that's when the algorithm changed. Something changed fundamentally about it. I don't think it's just being merely manipulated by coordinated complaining. I think it's like actually they're suppressing us in the algorithm somehow.
And I don't doubt that for a second. Your thoughts on that, Peyman?
I kind of agree with both of you. I think Peter is ultimately more correct in what he said, his blanket statement that they're using our tax dollars against us. Now, I think it is complaints. JP is also right. It can't just only be complaints. It could be Online Streaming Act, like Bill C-11. I think they have multiple different ways that they can deboost us. And as good as complaints are, like if you flag it as illegal or child pornography, I think they have just a more sophisticated system where they have this knob in Ottawa and they just dial it down.
Well, you have to remember people like Gerald Butts and all the people that were, you know, they had key people inside the PMO's office who just categorically could pick up the phone and say, we need a favor here. I mean, you got to remember, guys, we're here on Facebook. I still can't post news stories in Canada. If that's not totalitarianism, what is? And so anybody that understands the Fabianistic approach, Fabianism is death by 1,000 cuts. We'll just make a few small changes, and it's done strategically. And Mark Carney is the very best at it, because over 5 years, he made enough minor changes, whispering in the ear of Justin Trudeau, so that when he stepped into power, the framework was all laid out for him to be able to make hundreds of millions. What you saw him, the 103 conflicts of interest that he's declared, that's child's play as compared to what the money that he's going to make. Because when they changed access to our pension funds, any of these projects that are what's called backstop now by the federal government, let's say you're going to do a green initiative and there's going to be $100 billion. Well, what people don't realize is all those big projects pay management fees and finder's fees up front. It's like Tim Houston down in Nova Scotia wants to spend like $10 billion on windmills. Someone's getting a finder's fee. The typical finder's fee on those projects, guys, is between 1% to 3%. Even at 1.5% on a $10 billion project, someone's going to get a $150 million finder's fee for bringing that project to Nova Scotia. And our premier was an expert at hiding money with the Paradise Papers. I'm not saying it's him, but I can't say it isn't going to be him. But he's pushing awful hard for it. And it's insanity. Down in the U.S., they're shutting down all these projects. Right up here, they're going, no, we need a majority. Who can we potentially bribe to get across the floor? And no one's going to convince me, based on my background in politics, that everybody across the floor got a sweetheart deal that you will never be able to track through numbered corporations, relative somewheres, offshore accounts. It's just not going to happen. Right? I can't prove it, but I'm just asking on behalf of a friend.
How are we doing for questions, Peyman? Do you want to switch to the question portion?
Sure. We got a couple. Peggy, I believe, is in your neck of the woods, so she's got a three-part question. She says, what do you think of Tim giving the no buds contract to the French mafia on Mersey River? The French mafia here all fly under the liberal banner. They just got 231 million from the feds. Michelle Sampson, Edgar Sampson, Jason Boudreau, Daryl Sampson. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, those guys are a band of criminals. I'll give you an example. One of those Sampsons, Daryl Sampson's, I think Michelle Sampson was down in the Arashat area, and Dominic LeBlanc gave him with an outfit that there was only a few of them involved. I forget how many millions it was for him to get clam quota, and Buddy wouldn't know a walleyed pike from a smelt. He wasn't a fisherman. He just, he had a brother who was an MP up in my area, up near Bedford, Daryl Sampson. And all of a sudden, the money got dumped in their lap. Those guys just got $231 million from feds for part of a windmill project. Every one of them is deeply connected to the Liberal Party. And it's even at the point, I think that, I'm not sure it was Jason Boudreau or who it was, but one of that crew is actually heavily connected to another guy who crossed the floor. What was his name down there? I can't remember, but he was another floor crosser. And him and his husband are raising a couple of little girls, I think maybe twins. But down here, everybody is connected. And $231 million, they'll go, well, you know what, even if it's a finder's fee, we'll all take a 1.5% finder's fee off that individually. Okay, so that's a couple of million each. 1% finder's fee on 231 million, that's 2.3 million. That's a straight up fee. If it's 1%, if it's 3%, it's even more. That's the way the game is played. And here's what'll happen. That won't even last through a 48-hour news cycle. That'll be gone. And those boys will be sitting on their new boat on the Bredor Lakes, smoking cigars and drinking fine whiskey, single malt, 28-year-old, laughing, going, nobody cares. It's like you said, everybody's become so disengaged and so demoralized by this being, this happens every day, guys. Has there been a day since the 1st of January that there hasn't been a new scandal at some level in government across Canada? You can't keep track of it. And that's how people become demoralized. When was the last time you saw a politician resign? When was the last time you saw a politician formally charged? And when was the last time you saw a politician go to jail? You want to know how to demoralize a population? Answer those three questions. Because the last guy who got any serious charges was Mike Duffy. They charged him with 31 counts back in the day. And all he did was take money from a guy who loaned them $90,000. It wasn't even government money. And ever since then, I don't think the RCMP has formally charged, and nobody's gone to jail in politics in Canada. You have to understand in the judiciary, guys, that Crown prosecutors do not want to prosecute politicians because ultimately they want to get appointed to become judges. And that's going to end up being political. In Supreme Court, nobody wants to go after the federal government because it's Sean Fraser who decides who Supreme Court justices are going to be. And if you went after any party, they know this guy won't play ball. You're never going to become that Supreme Court judge. And every lawyer ultimately who's a Crown prosecutor wants to become a judge and a Supreme Court judge. So what you were saying earlier, John Paul, the entire system is set up to disincentivize people from doing the right thing. And I'm at that point in life, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. I'm going to do the right thing. One day I'm going to be dead. And people are going to, show up at my funeral. I hope a half a dozen or more. I'd like to be, that's why there's 6 handles. Hopefully, 6 people well enough that'll help Paul you out of here. But the reality is I want them looking at me saying, man, I don't want them looking at my funeral going, geez, he looks great. I want them saying, man, he looks like he's trampled by an elephant. What happened to him? Holy shit. There's nothing left of the man. Right? I'm going, boys, this to me, I'm all in. I'm not backing down from anybody. There's nothing they can do to me. I don't care.
That's the way I have to be right now. We need everyone to start to adopt that attitude, or we're not getting out of this. And it's like, again, to speak to the demoralization, people aren't even willing to educate themselves. Like they're not even willing to put a half an hour of research in to figure out what the government is doing to it, or more appropriately, how they're doing it to us and how we could potentially mitigate it. So it's again, man, it's getting frustrating. And then you come on here every day and you're deboosted and you see the division. Everyone's sure as hell arguing with one another, but no one's looking at, what could we unite around? Like for me, and I'm just like a broken record with this, but it seems like what should take a priority for Canadians is the integrity of our institutions. If they're corrupt, then nothing else matters. Like we should ensure that's the case first.
I agree with you on that. And that's the issue. I'll give you an example, guys. We've got 7.2 or 7.3% food inflation. Mark Carney said, judge me by the cost of groceries. With what's going on in the Middle East, what do you think is going to happen to gas prices here in the next month, 2 months? Right? I'm down here in Nova Scotia. Most young people that I know in their 30s still don't have a house. By the time I was on 35, I had 4 kids, buddy. I was on my 3rd house. I could buy a 3-bedroom, 3-bed house in Port Hawkesbury, overlooking the water with a fireplace for 1 year's pay, starting out working at Natural Resources. That same house today, 45 years later, it's 45 years older, that same house on that same job, I'd have to work 5 years now to buy that same house. The system is broken and government broke it. And the only way to fix this, guys, to be honest with you, the only solution that we've been able to come up with is what we're trying to do. And I'm trying to stay focused on it. So it's a start. And if we get enough, imagine having enough independence in every province to control legislatures. And you go, no, you can't do that. No. And the beauty of it is they can actually table legislation and force the parties in power to have to vote for it to stay in power. And the human condition is, once in power, these people will do anything they need to stay in power because they don't want to lose their pensions. Right? So they're going, well, we hate to do this, but we're going to have these sons of bitches have us over a barrel. We're going to have to change this legislation. Good. Now we've got recall. And, for recall to work, the only people that can participate in a recall are the people who turned out to vote. Imagine having that for legislation. Say, you're going to be able to recall even on parties, not just independents. If you make promises and you don't keep them, or you cross the floor, we're going to put recall legislation in, and we're going to force you as parties to vote for it. And the only people that can participate are those who showed up to vote. And that can all be monitored today through blockchain. And so what do you think that would do to voter turnout? You just say to people, if you don't hire them, you don't get a say in firing them. All of a sudden, in Nova Scotia, we used to get 78%, 80% voter turnout. We'd go back from 46% to 80% tomorrow if people knew that you could fire a politician who lied to you. You think the parties want that to happen? You think the federal government wants us to succeed here? You want to know why Sean Fraser took that lawyer from that major law firm and made him a Supreme Court judge? There's a reason. Now, I can't prove it. That's just speculation. But everything that I say is based on a preponderance of evidence that an average person of average intelligence may consider based on what they're being told. So imagine reaching into that case and pulling that top lawyer out and getting him to replace the original judge who was overseeing the case. What do you think the odds of that are? There was 3 Supreme Court justice openings. Why didn't he put him into one of them, one of the other 2? They do not want us to succeed.
Circumstantial evidence is still evidence. And when you have a preponderance of circumstantial evidence, I mean, people have been convicted of capital crimes with circumstantial evidence. It does still matter.
So we built a massive case here in Nova Scotia for our preponderance of evidence that we have through our FOI pops and what happened in the election. I believe, the evidence is supporting the assumption that we'll be able to prove malice, malicious intent, bad faith, and we'll be able to make major changes. It's not complicated, guys. It's way less complicated than you think it is. And we're going to remove the barriers for independents running all across Canada. The thing is, the nice thing about it is the people who do know what's going on, those are the ones who will form those groups inside a community, and they'll pick from themselves who they want for a candidate. Let me warn you on this. The first person who puts up their hand says, pick me, don't pick them. That's the wrong person. You want somebody who's going, you know what, I've thought about this long and hard, and I've got some people who want me to do it, and someone's got to make these changes, because very few people get in for altruistic reasons. They get in for a pension, and they get in for power, and they get in because they know people. And you know what, someone will go to them in business and say, Pete, if you can change this legislation over here and get this done, we stand to make $100 million. Now, offshore, we can set things up for you, and we can make sure your kids' university is paid for. And we'll, I know you say some things online, but we'll get some of that. We'll see what we can't do to get some of that where we're trying to suppress you. Let's see if we can get some of that suppression lifted on you. People have no idea sometimes who they're dealing with and the level of power that they have. And here in Nova Scotia, we got a major issue. Same issues all across Canada, guys. So what happens is that's why we've got engineers on our team rather than politicians, because they just take it apart and they go, here's where the break is. Here's where the weak point is. Here's what we need to do. And that contract is the make or break for politics in the future of Canada.
I like it. Is there any more questions, Peyman?
We can do one more. This is two different people. They touch on the same thing. JT says, Canadians are so demoralized. How do we moralize them again? Andre asks a similar thing. How do we get ignorant people, the majority of Canadians, interested in politics?
Well, here's the thing is, everything in human nature, all you have to do is, everything that we do is based on human nature. And human nature always goes back to what's in it for me. Most of the people I know at your guys' age range now still don't have kids. They can't afford kids anymore. They can't afford a house, and they can't afford kids. Or if they're, let's say they're 10, 15 years younger than you guys. But a lot of people can't afford kids, and they can't afford a home. And everything they look at every day, they're starting to realize that I'm being lied to daily. And at some point, people have to have hope. And when we were doing this with the independent movement, all we were doing was going into communities, giving people hope. Hope was for some, we didn't want to go with the old corny bullshit, which is hope and change. But this is hope for real change. And a change that someone somewhere is finally going to be held accountable. And the only way to really moralize people again is to start seeing politicians doing lengthy jail time for the crimes they committed. Justin Trudeau should be in jail for the rest of his life. Literally. I launched 3 federal criminal code cases against him for violations of Section 121 of the Criminal Code. And the RCMP didn't want to proceed. And when they did, they couldn't find a prosecutor in Ottawa to take the case because they want to become a judge and a Supreme Court judge. So there's corruption at every level. And all you need every now and then, guys, is one person to stand up in a crowded room and say what everybody else is thinking. And they don't have the courage to stand up and say it. And when you stand up and say it sometimes in a room, you don't know who's listening. I do these because I don't know who's listening. Someone else might go, you know what, that's a hell of a good idea. We should maybe consider what that guy's saying, right? And when we win our court case, we'll do more to instill hope in Canadians in politics, probably than anyone's done in the last 100 years. Now, that didn't come from me. That's I have people saying, man, if you can pull it, I got people from other countries saying, if you can pull this off, man, I'll give you an example. I was on a talk show a week and a half ago, and a guy in the Dutch Parliament, I think it's Rob Roos, wanted to know about what we're doing. And I sent him because there's a whole framework behind this, like how to set up your committees, how to make sure that you don't get infiltrated and taken over, and that the people as an independent still remain independent. I've got all that framework, and I'll send it to anybody who's interested. What can I do to become an independent? So we have that. But this is a guy in the Dutch Parliament going, I love this idea. This might work over here, right? Same thing down in Australia. Same thing in New Zealand. We haven't had it. Well, we've got one person in the UK now, but the UK is so batshit crazy right now, guys. They're gone off the rails. When I watch Starmer, he's worried about insulting, radical Islamists because they'll burn her all down. And he's doing the same thing as Carney. They're flip-flopping to the point they could be selling Nike flip-flops. It's that bad.
Yeah, it's the same agenda being implemented, and the UK are clearly further ahead with implementation. That's for sure. It's a mess. But with that said, Peter, I want to thank you for coming out to speak with us. Before we go, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you, where they can follow you and support?
The biggest thing I ask for, guys, is support on X, right? And I'm going to be setting up a new website and some other stuff and books. Rather than sell my books through Amazon, I'm going to sell them through Books Buy, so that Amazon doesn't take like 9% of your profits. But if you really want to know some of what's going on, that book over on Amazon is the #1 bestseller in 3 categories. Pick up a copy of that, because that's something you can actually hand to somebody. Say, man, you might want to read this, right? Because that book goes back to my bootlegging days, back when I was I was a fine example of what a redneck down in Cape Breton should have been, John Paul. I mean, buddy, I was, let's just say before I did law enforcement, I was good at law enforcement because I knew what the other side was up to. And I had a heck of a really good time in that career. But the biggest thing I ask for, guys, is just support. Just follow me on X at Peter R. MacIsaac. And then when you see any of that stuff that I post, feel free to share it. The problem is I've got some really good people who don't want to share some of my stuff, because I don't, what's that thing? I'm not Willy Wonka. I don't candy coat too much. Like, that book of mine is pretty politically incorrect. I've got a saying on there. If what's that saying? If you don't like what I have to say, have yourself a big old cup of shut the F up and realize your parents raised a pussy. Just saying.
Well, on that note, Peyman, do you have anything? I'll give you the final words.
Yeah, Peter, can you just tell the audience the name of the book? I know it's like a provocative name, but they need to know what to download or buy.
Yeah, it's called The Redneck Conservative: How Conservatives Are Made. And for the record, I'm not a conservative. I'm an independent. But most independents today have conservative mindsets, but they realize, like I do, that the party system is broken. So you can go over to Amazon, and it's on. You can get an Audible copy, an e-copy, or a paper copy. And if you have a paper copy, and I run into you anywhere, I'd love to have a quick chat and sign it for you. Not that it'll mean much, but might mean something to me.
Wait,
bottom line
JT.
is, guys, once you get a paper copy that you can't be censored, you can hand that to anybody. I don't care what they do.
I think JT loves the name of the title of the book.
Nice. Well, with that said, I want to take a moment and thank everyone who tuned in today. And I will appeal once more. We get the majority of our views, which is not much these days, but we get them after the live broadcast. So it's still very much advantageous to us if you were to share this stream. Or, like I said, send it to anyone that you think might enjoy content such as this. It means the world to us. And with that said, I want to thank you again, Peter, for coming out to chat with us. We definitely want to have you back after we get some information on this case and see. We want to follow it with you.
That'd be great, guys. I'm more than happy to come back. And if you know anybody else that's interested in doing an interview on this, don't get me wrong, they may pay a penalty for it, but I'm more than willing to share this story with from one coast on Canada across the other. I wouldn't even mind, for example, we used to, when we started off, we were in rooms of 2 and 3 people. And then we got to the point we were filling, 200-300 people when we were doing talks in communities. So whether it's in person or whether it's on anything like this, I'm more than happy to help out. Thanks again, gentlemen. I do appreciate it.
Excellent. With that said, this is the Philosopher, the Stoic, and the Teddy Bear. Cheers, guys. We'll see you next time.